So our next panel, our next speaker is Ian Leatherman. Is Mr. Leatherman here? Yes, okay, awesome. So equilibrium of power, turning the tables on the adversary. So Mr. Leatherman, Maritime Cyber Warfare Officer in the Navy Reserve and Zero Trust Lead for Microsoft Federal. He is passionate about serving his country and seeks to make all aspects of our lives and economy more resilient and secure, especially in the cyber domain. Mr. Leatherman, over to you. We've got many mics up here. You got a clicker? Good. I'm going to go with that one.
All right, here we go.
You good?
Good morning, everyone. I appreciate your time today. I will let folks trickle in a little bit here. So yeah, Ian Leatherman. I'm a Maritime Cyber Warfare Officer in my Navy Reserve hat. And then, as stated at Microsoft, supporting the Zero Trust effort. But more importantly, part of MCPA and been supporting this community for a few years, thanks to Joe and Chris. And so I wanted to give a few words of thanks and also, to give back a little bit to MCPA here, because I wouldn't be where I am in my career without people that are supporting MCPA. So when I left active duty, I was actually, very burnt out, as most are in cyber, and I was ready to just cut the cord. So luckily, my boss at the time, Admiral White, convinced me to think about staying in the reserve. So I said I'd do one tour because of him and his leadership and give that to him. But I was still in the old information professional community of the Navy, right? It was still very comms focused. Cyber was not a formal career path. And so being a reservist, even as an IP officer, was not really what I was trying to do. But thanks to people like Chris and his role as PCA and others with MCPA that advocated, there is even now a Maritime Cyber Warfare Officer community in the Navy, right? So that is really the direct work of MCPA for me to even have a chance to be in this role. So with that, also wanted to say on behalf of everyone at Microsoft, Microsoft is incredibly proud to be platinum sponsor of MCPA now, and again, giving back to this community. And I would like to see other platinum sponsors here next year. So this is my challenge to the rest of the community. Please, support MCPA to the fullest extent you possibly can. So with that, let's get to how are we actually defending against the adversary and flipping the tables a little bit. So in order to do that, we're going to go to the last slide. Let's try this one. There we go. So we're in a little bit of a cultural revolution at Microsoft, right? I'm sure you've seen in the news, we have been actively fighting against Midnight Blizzard, Russian adversary. And so we approach this challenge with both technical and operational rigor and with a focus on continuous improvement. This challenge is this new normal that we have, which is private companies, local municipalities, the non-national parts of our country are having to go head-to-head with a national adversary, right? So at Microsoft, we are head-to-head with a component of the SVR. And so think about that, right? This is a uniformed military component, and we have to defend ourselves and go up against this adversary without Title X authorities. We can't fire back, but we are expected to defend ourselves against a nation-state adversary who takes years and years to plan their attack, right? This is not the normal hacker out of the basement just doing a drive-by and attacking the company. This is multi-year planned intelligence-based attacks. And so how do we possibly go up against that adversary? That is the new normal, right? And so we at Microsoft, yes, we have a fighting chance of going against that adversary. But that's not good enough, right? How do we do that to our local governments? Our local governments, like I'm in a small town in Connecticut right now, my government has maybe 2 people that are doing IT. They had never thought of cybersecurity, right? And so now with MCPA support, they're thinking about cybersecurity. They're thinking about actually putting that in the budget and doing that. But that's, again, like at that local level, they have to go up against that nation-state adversary. So as we start thinking about, the technical operational rigor and continuous improvement, what does that look like? How do we do that in the cyber world, right, community? So to do that, I'm going to go through and talk about nuclear submarines, because that's actually where I started in the Navy, was nuclear training. And that is still, to this day, the most powerful training I have ever received for cyber operations is my nuclear training. And I'm going to talk about why that is. So nuclear power, it's not that hard, right? The hot rock makes steam, and the steam makes the boat go. That's what we tell everybody. It's really not that hard. But yet, the Navy's the only one that does it. The Army tried, failed, blew themselves up, and they were never allowed to touch nuclear power ever again. The Air Force tried, built nuclear-powered jet engines. Those never flew, and they're sitting in a parking lot in the middle of Idaho for you to go tour as a museum. So why did the Navy sustain, right? And it gets to the same principles that we're talking about. And so Admiral Rickover basically had to get this equation right of the adversary in nuclear power is physics. It is complex physics, right? Nuclear physics, E equals mc squared. That's hard. And so in order to actually tip those scales and have the advantage over nuclear power, not blow up the reactor, have the meltdown, have all these issues like a Chernobyl, right? You have to have brilliant people build the reactor, design a inherently stable system, and then you have to have brilliant people who are well-trained operate that system. And we assume that both of those sets of humans are going to fail. And so that's really the magic equation that Rickover started with here, is that when you build a nuclear reactor for the Navy, you build one that is inherently stable. So Chernobyl's biggest issue was the hotter it got, the bigger the boom. It was designed in a way that it was inherently unstable. It was inherently set to any mistake would blow it up. Our nuclear reactors that we do with the Navy are inherently stable, meaning the hotter it gets, the more it shuts itself down. So the people who design that reactor are assuming that people like me are going to fail at running that reactor, and it is going to have to shut itself down and be inherently safe. This is very analogous to the secure by design, secure by default terms that you start hearing from CISA. We need those same practices in our cyber systems. We need them to inherently be more secure when things go wrong than actually get worse the more they go. And so this challenge is interesting, and I would say, what makes those nuclear operators special is that assumption of failure, but also learning that system as a whole. And so there's 3 books. So going with, like, Chris had his 3 books this morning, I have my 3 books. And these also go in order and they tell a story. So what Admiral Rickover figured out was, well, actually I'll say, what Satya is telling his employees at Microsoft to do of raise the bar, become more technically brilliant, operationally brilliant, and continuously improve, it's not new, right? This goes back to what Rickover did. And so when 1959, Admiral Rickover wrote Education and Freedom. He understood that technical brilliance doesn't just come naturally. You have to start with it in the education system. And so this is where I'm a big fan of cyber snacks, because MCPA is not just saying, hey, we need brilliant people at cyber in the military. We actually have to grow them, and that means starting at elementary school. That means actually getting there, teaching STEM education at the beginning so that folks can actually understand the technology and do cyber right in the future. And then the operational rigor, you have Against the Tide here, a great book about what was Admiral Rickover's mindset, right? It's that assuming failure, assuming the humans will make a mistake because humans are humans, so inherently build those systems. But you train for that excellence, and you drill and you drill and you train for it. And then turn the ship around is Rickover wasn't perfect. He didn't think of everything. A lot of stuff was thought about in the 60s, but it wasn't everything. And so the license for continuous improvement is there. And many of the ways that we operate our submarines today are with that continuous improvement. And one other thing about technical excellence here is there is a formal training pipeline, right? You don't get you're not allowed to touch or even think about touching an operational nuclear reactor in the Navy until you have done 6 months of nuclear power school, where you learn the physics, the chemistry, the math that's needed to actually understand, I'll go back, the equation here, right? You have to understand the adversary, and your adversary is physics. And then you go and you do the operational work. You drill, you plan for the worst case scenario. You think about all of those things and you exercise for it. And it doesn't matter your rank. So even if you are a captain, an 06 for the Navy, right? You're a captain who's going to go be the commander of an aircraft carrier. You have to go through nuclear power school. But yet, are we doing that in the cyber community? Do we say, you're in charge of cyber, therefore I'm going to send you to a school to teach you the basics, to teach you the required education and math behind it so that you can go make better cyber decisions? We're not, right? I think of how many people I had as commanders in my Navy job who were in leadership positions for cyber, and they didn't understand the tech, right? Love Admiral White because he understood the tech. He grew up in that, and he understood the tech. Other people in that same role, not necessarily. And they didn't have a school. They weren't forced to go to a school to actually learn it. So a lot of the moral of the story here is, right, like we need to learn from this because here's what the balance looks like in cyber. So I make the case here that cyber is actually far more complicated. Everything I've touched in cyber is far more complicated than any nuclear reactor I've ever touched. Right? So when you guys think about nuclear, like nobody's going to say, oh, congratulations, you went and did an AP physics class. That's good enough. You get to go to run a nuclear reactor now. Right? You would never, as a person in society, seeing 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and any other nuclear accident, you would never say, that's a good idea. But that is exactly what we're doing in cyber today. Right? We are letting anybody and everybody go stand up a network, stand up a cyber system. Sorry. My emergency alert system's going off. So we need to raise the bar on that, right? And understand that the complexities in cyber are actually far harder. And so one of the reasons for that is the physics is harder. Yes, nuclear physics is hard, but cyber physics is even harder, right? Schrodinger's equation on here, time-based equation is the one I'm showing. And if you're not looking into quantum and if you're not looking into quantum physics as part of your cyber training, you're already behind the curve, right? The quantum physics is going to be a part of cyber. It's already starting to be there. It's going to be a part. That physics is hard. You need to understand it for cyber. But the other part that makes this harder is we have a human adversary. At least with nuclear power, I know my adversary. It's neutrons. They're predictable. I can put statistical models around them. We have real-world humans with human intelligence behind as our threat actors, right? And then we have this other component. We don't just have operators and architects on the cyber side, on the Blue Force side. We actually have defenders as well. So we have another group of humans who's involved in it, and we have to tip those scales. And so if this situation we're in with cyber is harder than nuclear power, we should be doing at least what the nuclear power community is doing in the Navy, and then some. And we are not doing that, right? We have pockets of excellence inside our military today. And so I did get the chance on Tuesday to go to Cyber Yankee. So up in Cape Cod, got to see what the National Guard is doing in Cyber Yankee, got to meet the creator of our awesome badge, and see him in uniform and see how he works, right? But that is a pocket of excellence. That is a pocket of we are starting to teach people in the next generation how to go defend, but that has not scaled, right? And now we have a maritime cyber warfare officer in the Navy, or officer community in the Navy. There still is no roadmap, right? We have a community, it's defined, but it still is not going to be able to tackle these challenges. We don't have a group that could find the SVR, right, in an attack on DoD systems today, let alone any of that other infrastructure. So one of the things that I will say is like, why again I'm biased as a nuke, but why are nukes the best at cyber? Well, it goes back to something that John Lambert said. So Microsoft, super smart guy, from 10 years ago, tweeted out, right, like the biggest problem with network defense is that defenders think in lists, attackers think in graphs. And as long as this is true, attackers win. And I think this is very relevant, right? So when you think again of like, why are some of the best cyber operators nuclear trained people? Well, it's because nukes are trained to think in graphs. And this is part of that year-long school that you go through is when you learn the physics and when you get taught these things, you learn systems engineering. And so you have to go through this thought experiment in all of your training, which is, I'm a drop of water from the nuclear reactor primary system. How could that drop of radioactive water end up in your drinking water at lunch on the submarine? Right? That should never happen. Never have radioactive water in your drinking water. But you are forced to think through that, and that therefore you have to know how all of those systems interconnect. What is the physics of those? What would have to go wrong? What chain of events would have to go wrong for you to have radioactive water in your drinking glass at lunchtime on that submarine? And so that teaches you, that forces you to start thinking in graphs. You're thinking of interconnections. You are not thinking of, I have a list of 50 valves on the submarine. No, you have to know, how are they connected? What are their relationships? And so I don't think it is a coincidence that when COVID hit, and I was still active duty under Admiral White, since he's sitting here, I'm going to keep picking on him, but the 3 people that he picked to solve the Navy's network problems and defense problems at COVID were all 3 former nuclear-trained sailors. So because we had to solve, in COVID, everybody went telework. You had to solve distributed problems, and you had to think in a graph in order to do this. And so I'm making the argument, making the case, compelling the cyber industry here that this needs to be our new standard. This is how we need to do business, right? And so it goes to policymakers and policy offices. We can't think in lists. We cannot make policy in lists. We cannot say, hey, we have an ICAM solution. Here's a list of identities. We have to be able to prove how do those identities map to endpoints and other digital elements, because that's the attack surface the adversary is going to go through. And we need to be able to say, here is this development tenant, and how are all the ways that they could go to reading my CEO's email? Right? If you're not thinking in that graph and you're not looking in that kind of connected behavior, you will never find the modern adversary, meaning Russia, China. Right? If you were just looking for network boundary defense, you will never find that adversary. And so that is exactly how Microsoft found Midnight Blizzard in our environment. Was we were looking at the graph, and we were looking for behavioral anomalies, and we found that behavioral anomaly. Maybe next slide. And the clicker stopped. There we go. Okay, thank you. So this is something that I want to talk about, is like the OODA loop, right? Like Microsoft is starting to think in this OODA loop term, because it is warfare, right? Yes, private company, but we were thinking in terms of warfare, and the OODA loop came from the Air Force with warfare. And so when you think of previous attacks, and Jason Atwell from Mandiant went into this in his talk in the last hour, when people get this attack, you find the adversary after they've completed their OODA loop. And then, so what? What are you doing next, right? Nobody is going beyond that. And so I love that Jason talked about that, because those are the issues that Mandiant are seeing, and that's the issues that we are seeing, and that's the issues we had. And so how do you actually go beyond this? So this is one of those things of where we turn the tables. So because we had sensors of like our zero trust type sensors, so Chris was mentioning zero trust earlier. Zero trust is funded, but one thing that hasn't happened yet is that connection of when you deploy all of these things for zero trust, you actually enable an OCO component. But nobody's thinking in systems, nobody's thinking in graphs. Therefore, the OCO community has realized that zero trust is actually going to be their best friend. Because how did Microsoft get in to see the adversary with Midnight Blizzard? It was because of the thinking in graphs. And the only way we could see what was happening in our terrain and see a behavioral anomaly was because we had those sensors. And those sensors only existed because of a zero trust mindset in the infrastructure, right? It's building that nuclear reactor so that it's inherently stable. That's the point of zero trust. But then what can you do with that? That means you have tremendous amounts of threat intelligence. That means the adversary is still in the orient phase. The adversary is going through, looking through emails, trying to figure out what are in those emails. But then you don't stop there and say, I got breached, and throw your hands in the air. Let's get ahead of that, right? So we're in this situation now where the adversary is in the orient phase, and we, blue forces, are in the act phase. And the act means let's take the knowledge that the adversary has, let's think about it faster, let's know our knowledge of the systems and react to it faster, which means change the locks on all the doors. We need to change all the locks that the adversary knows about now. And that's not just our locks, but all the customer locks. Anybody in the world that the adversary might know their locks, right? So that is a proactive element that's never been done before. And it's finally getting to this point of let's actually be inside their OODA loop. We know the adversary is going to get in, right? They are taking 5 years to plan an attack that we don't know about. That black swan will come. So we can't prepare for it fully, but we can find it, and then we can react to it, and we can react faster than the adversary. And so this is the new paradigm that we're trying to get to, right? But this is hard. This is, how are we supposed to go up against a nation state? We can't fire back. We have to outmaneuver them in our own space. And the only way to do that is with technical brilliance, right? With brilliantly designed systems and then continuously improve. We did not find the adversary fast enough here, right? It was fast. It was better than normal. It was better than when they hit solar winds, and better than when they had, let's see, there's the same adversary that did the DNC, the same adversary for NotPetya, right? This is an adversary that every one of those incidents, this is how we found out about it, right? NotPetya was after global shipping was shut down. It was after the damage had already been done, and then now we're actually inside that. The damage could have been worse, right? But we got to it, we mitigated it, we shut them down far, far sooner. But that same threat intelligence, that same zero trust telemetry we have, imagine if you had Title X authorities. Imagine if you knew exactly who the actor was, how they came in, what car they drive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had the ability to use that for other purposes, right? And that's the part that we want to try to get to the DoD cyber community is, this is good. Zero trust is good. It's not about it, but it's not just defense. Take it that step further. Think in that graph. Think in that systems model. Understand your systems, and knowing how the adversary is trying to exploit your systems allows you now to give that chance of exploiting the adversary one step further, especially if you have those Title X authorities. So with that, I want to thank all of you. There are some URLs here if you would like to know more and how we're mapping to zero trust. But think about the standard that's being set, right? When we think about what is your cyber community doing, what needs to happen, somebody like Admiral Montgomery, who's going to be talking with Admiral White later today, Admiral Montgomery is another nuclear trained officer, right? He started out in the submarine space. So when he thinks about our cyber problems, I guarantee you he's thinking in graphs. He probably doesn't realize it. He might not have thought about it until now, but he's thinking in graphs, and that's really important. So when he talks, I'm inclined to listen about what does our workforce need to do, because we need to think in that graph. We need to build that connective tissue holistically. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate all of you, and look forward to seeing you at HammerCon next year.
Before you do the good stuff, I just want to say, bold assertion to say you have to be Navy nuclear compliant trained to be good in cyberspace. So the vast majority of the audience, you all kick ass in cyberspace whether you have nuclear background. But it is reflective, I think, about a commitment to excellence in the pursuit of technical mastery. And all of you in here are good because you choose to do that. So thank you.
I want to tell a similar story about our good young Ian here. So when COVID was going down, and Admiral White was sort of fighting the fight in the 5-meter target, and Ian was really mostly responsible for doing what we now affectionately call flank speeds in the Navy, which really had a lot to do with how we rolled out Microsoft Defender and a lot of Microsoft tools. I think you were living in your basement the entire time this was going on. So during COVID, living in his basement, basically spearheading the way the Navy, through Admiral White's leadership, was going to roll this tool out. But what I love about Ian is Ian also wasn't afraid to make these other phone calls. I don't know if Admiral White at the time was crazy about it, but he would reach out to me every once in a while as the PCA. And I guess what I really always appreciate about what he was doing was he really was doing this, just wasn't doing the job. I mean, he really believed in what he was doing, understood what it meant to the Navy rolling out, and just kind of took the bull by the horns and said, sort of with the cover, the top cover provided by the commander, just got it done. And I think like you and a few other people, I think when the book is written, right, when we start to put the story together about the people who really were the Doolittles and the Billy Mitchells of the community that made these decisions, your name would be there. I saw Tyson Metters here. For all of you who know, Tyson Metters is sort of the brainchild behind B++. There he is. Tyson's the other one. He's also kind of a jackass.
Chris, you got to stop talking about all this Air Force kicking Navy platform ass.
But there's something you said to that. That said, and also, Ian was also responsible for getting the MCPA, our largest donation to date, which again, thank you for getting Microsoft as a platinum sponsor of the organization. And for all of that, we very much want to recognize you with the order of 4, because you're the ones out of white. I know you'd like to say some stuff about this young man.
Yeah, so, look, I'll say it about Ian because I know him and I've worked with him, but I think he would be prepared to say it in observer about all of you that he worked with in your capacity, right? You grow up in a bureaucracy, whether it's my service, my historical service, your service, your commitment, your mission, but you share this operational space. And I do think that to a point, and actually maybe to a point which makes leaders uncomfortable, your willingness to push the envelope on what is thought to be conventionally effective is actually going to be the secret sauce of our success. And so some of those lessons I learned from people in this audience, John Davis among them, his background in the Army, grew up in the soft world, this commitment to being exceptional. And frankly, bureaucracies don't like exception. And so I invite all of you, please do not, like Ian, do not satisfy or be satisfied with conventional thinking or good enough. Because the adversary doesn't give a shit about our good enough. Because they are demonstrating every day. So Ian, thanks for your commitment to cause and purpose. So thanks. All right.
A couple pictures here. We read the order to the citation.
Okay. Infinite cyberspace. And thank you very much.